Boundaries, part 2. Hello everyone and welcome back to Friendeavor. I am so glad to see that you have stopped by. Today we are talking about boundaries. Now, we have done a boundaries video before and we covered a lot of good information there. Watch it here if you haven't already. Today we are going to talk part 2 of boundaries. Now, in the first video we talked a lot about boundaries based off of what other people do, how their actions influence you. This video we're going to talk about how far you will let your actions go, or stuff that you set a boundary on that you won't participate in, or what you believe in, or that kind of stuff. Now you might say, Danielle, this is a friendship channel, not a channel to try to tell me how to live my life. Correct, but when it comes to friendship, there's a lot of elements to boundaries, but it can be very detrimental or beneficial depending on the strength of your boundaries, how you apply them, and all that stuff like that. When I first started this channel, I told you guys that I'm not a friendship expert, and everything that I present or I teach about, whatever, is going to be based off of my own life experience, some expert thing that I read, like a book or something like that, or people that I talk to who know what they're talking about. I'd like to give a shout out to my mom, who is a therapist and also just a person with a lot of life experience, and I got her take on boundaries, and we're going to talk about some of the stuff she shared and how it applies to us in our friendships. So let's get into it. The most obvious thing when you think of boundaries is like the stopping point, right? Where something begins or something ends. And in the first video we talked about like physical boundaries of countries, and we, got definitions and all that. I want to kick it off by talking about how your boundaries should be true to your beliefs. That you don't have to make up a boundary just because someone else does. And we're going to get into that later about how family and community influences your boundaries, but boundaries are true to what you believe. So whether your best friend has a boundary that's different than yours, whether it's more conservative or more liberal, it's all about personal boundaries. You have to be honest with yourself. Honest and how you approach your boundaries. It's not enough to just set a boundary because of what other people think or what other people expect you to have. Be honest with yourself. I set this boundary because I know that I struggle with this. I set this boundary because I don't want to ever cross to the point where I struggle with that, or I don't want to find myself engaging in this or that or the other. I don't want to get into specifics because everybody's situation is different, and I would like to present to you that as you get older, whether you are a teenager just starting out, figuring out who you are, or you're an older person, as you progress, that you are honest with yourself about why you set that boundary. A point that my mom made is that boundaries, they can be messy. They can be messy when you are first exploring what it means to have that boundary. So like personally it can be messy, and it can also be messy with your other relationships. In our case, specifically friendships. Because how do you explain to someone, no, I'm not gonna do that, or no, I'm not gonna go there, or no, I'm not gonna talk about that, without sounding like you are better than the other person for having that boundary, or that you are holier than thou, or anything like that. And when you're starting off setting boundaries and relating them to people and encountering situations where you have to share that that's your boundary, it can really be messy. In our last video about boundaries, we talked about the bottom 3 levels of friendship pyramid: acquaintances, friendships, and good friendships. I'd like to reiterate that once you're at that top tier with your spouse, or the second tier with your best friend, you'd think that you'd have your boundaries sorted out at that point. But as you get older, you might realize that you need to set up new boundaries. And even with best friends, it can be difficult to broach the subject of a new boundary. So while I hope that everything comes up roses for you and that it's just sunshine all the time with your friends and when you set boundaries, be prepared and know that it can be messy, but stand your ground, stay true to your beliefs, be honest with yourself, and more importantly, don't belittle someone for not having the same boundary that you have. It's not a matter of who's better or who's right or who's wrong or who's not good, whatever. It's not about that. Boundaries are extremely, extremely personal. So while you need to set boundaries for yourself, you also have to respect that people are not going to have the same boundaries as you, and that's okay. That's okay. So like we talked about a few minutes ago, boundaries can be influenced. They can be influenced by your family or your community, your social circle, whatever that may be. So for example, when I was 16, I moved to California from a different state. Culturally, it was like culture shock. I was still in the United States, but it was about as vastly different as you can get socially, culturally, state to state. A lot of the personal boundaries that I had for communication or friendship or what I would do, what I wouldn't do, was very much based off of my family boundaries, like boundaries that had been set by my family and what I had experienced growing up. So that's something that may not have been done in Michigan was done in California, and or vice versa. This really goes back to the being honest, because when you grow up, it's very important that you understand why you have those boundaries. If you just set a boundary and you don't know why you have it, you might end up crossing that boundary and it could be not a good thing. You could end up having a bad experience, or something detrimental could happen to you because you didn't understand why you had that boundary, or you let it crumble because you let someone influence you negatively. Alternatively, you might find that, you know what, that boundary was for a specific season of my life and it's not really necessary anymore. It's all about what works for you and what's going to help you be a better person, a better friend, and a better Christian. Lastly, I want to talk about how it affects your friendships. In your friendships, you should be mature enough to understand that you and your friend are two different people, right? As much as you have the same similar interests, or maybe you're complete opposites. You might be those friends that are the blonde to the brunette, the yin to the yang, the sunset to the sunrise. It might be that kind of friendship, or it might be the we both love chocolate ice cream, we both love the beach, we both whatever. Regardless of which type of friendship you have, you are two different people, or a group of different people depending on your circle. You have got to respect the boundaries of the people around you. I have got to respect the boundaries of the people around me. While I might be fine talking about some subject, one of my friends might not be comfortable. So it is my very real responsibility to maybe not know the ins and outs of their boundaries, but when I come up to that line, I stop, I back up, and I let that remain. It's not my job to go beating down someone else's boundaries just because it'll make me feel better about myself, or I think that, hey, you're wrong setting that boundary. No. That's not my job. That's not your job. Your job is to set boundaries for yourself and to respect the boundaries of the people around you. If I had a friend that wanted to just berate me for having a boundary that I set for myself, guess what I would do? Snip. That is not a friend. Now, if they are genuinely curious and they want to ask you questions about it and maybe learn about your boundary, well then yeah, I'm not saying that you have to cut someone off just because they ask you a question about your boundary. But if someone's going to try to take you down the wrong path or crush every boundary that you've set for yourself, it is up to you to reevaluate how that person fits into your life. Well, I hope you learned something today. Boundaries part 2 that's not an easy subject, but it's definitely very, very vital to the success of your life, to your friendships, your relationships in general, and just being a good person. So it's your job to make boundaries for yourself, to not make people feel bad about theirs, and to just live a harmonious, peaceful, loving life that affects those around you in a positive way. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, subscribe, like this video, go to frendavor.net, check it out, cool stuff all the time. Friendship is a journey. It's an endeavor. I will see you next time on Friendeavor.